Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another AI news show where myself and Kevin Kieller is going to be digging into some of the latest news headlines in the world of AI. And we're also going to be talking to Karana Gatimu, who's a principal manager for Microsoft 365 Customer Advocacy Group at Microsoft. And we're going to be talking to her for some of her top tips on AI adoption in your enterprise. So look out for that. Welcome, Kevin. How's it going?
Well, fantastic. I'm super excited for our guest and another show and no lack of AI news. That's not surprising, but let's dig into it, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots and lots of news around, but I suppose just we're trying to line this up with today's main guest speaker topic as well. And implementation and adoption is really big, isn't it, in AI right now? And it's something that enterprises are, I imagine, challenged with. Are you finding that? Is that fair to say? This is a big topic right now, Kevin?
Yeah, I think with all technology, adoption is what drives the return on investment, right? And so, that's why I'm thrilled with our guest, because that's what she focuses on. And that's always been the case with many technologies, but especially I think with AI, there are some extra challenges. There's excitement, which is fantastic, but there's also extra challenges in ensuring you get this adoption and sustained usage and really connect it to these measurable business outcomes, right? So I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just start with a few bits of news to start off with. This was actually a blog from Alex McMullen, the CTO for Pure Storage, and he was talking about the considerations for organizing and planning AI implementations. And there was a couple of good key points in there. What did you think to the story?
Yeah, so I thought Alex did a good job. He talked about the two paths, like the people that are going to go fast because they want to make sure that they're not missing out on return on investment or falling behind their competitors, and the people that are going to go slower, more methodically, and kind of have more of a longer term perspective. I think then he described some of the challenges, like if you're building AI yourself, like whether it's access to GPU, data centers, then all the kind of climate impacts of your data centers. He concludes, and I agree with this, which is saying most organizations are going to need to partner with, whether it's managed service providers for cloud scaling, some of the hyperscale cloud providers, or just partnering to get that expertise. So I think he raises some good issues in terms of the two paths, but ultimately I think partnership around AI is complicated, and so access to resources and expertise, I think partnerships are increasingly the best path forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the next story I picked out was always quite similar, but it was off the back of PegaWorld 2024, the big conference that's just recently happened, and they were talking about, or one of their key themes at the event was AI implementation, focusing on practical use cases and enterprise adoption. Kevin, what did you think to that one?
Yeah, so I think maybe a lot of the audience may not be familiar with Pega. They have I'd say they have an AI decision making and workflow automation platform, analytics, decision support, robotic process automation. So that's Pega, and PegaWorld, as you said, is their conference. So I think the two key things that I took from the article was they were trying to talk about this right brain, left brain problem. Although I think, I was doing some research, Harvard Medical, that's not necessarily a true thing, but it's interesting to talk about, right? So you have the analytical problems, and they were talking about how you could use AI and machine learning and predictive models for that. That's kind of more the left brain side. And then they were talking about generative AI as being a good tool for the more creative, or what people think of as right brain problems. So I thought that was an interesting perspective, because I think a lot of times people think about using generative AI and they think humans are creative and AI is not. And yet a whole bunch of studies suggest that generative AI is quite creative because, of course, it's been trained on a whole bunch of creative, data going into the training model. So I thought that was the most interesting thing that I took out of the article, and I appreciated you sharing it.
Yeah, and there was a really quite impactful comment in the article. I think the Alan Trefler, the Pega's CEO, said most enterprise AI agents are garbage, pointing to the necessity for more practical AI applications, which I'm sure we're going to talk more and more about today. But surely AI has to be practical, and there has to be use cases for this technology, or otherwise it's not going to get off the starting blocks. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Like AI needs to be directly connected to driving measurable business outcomes, right? That's success.
Great stuff. Well, last but not least, the last story I picked out was from HRO Today, HR publication. And it said that organizations are increasingly leveraging AI to enhance talent management, bridging those skill gaps and boosting retention, with thoughtful implementation being essential. I was really keen to kind of understand what you thought thoughtful meant in this article, and what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to say this article overall was a bunch of what I call motherhood statements, like eat your vegetables, get plenty of sleep, do lots of exercise. So, I mean, there was nothing inherently wrong about it, but it was a lot of generalities. And I think, hopefully we'll get into some more specifics, later on. But what I thought was interesting about it was AI in the human resource space, right? So it's talking about, AI to help you perhaps identify a career path, AI to help learning and development, which I think there's huge opportunities there. Like we're seeing things that, Microsoft and Khan Academy are doing in the learning space, which is super exciting. And then, AI, potentially around employee engagement. I mean, there's, but there was a lot of, I think, hopeful statements like AI can help people be more competent, can make people feel more autonomous, can create stronger relationships. I mean, I think that's more aspirational than, and it reminds me of the early unified communications days when we don't have enough metrics yet. So we throw out a lot of aspirations. It's not to say AI isn't going to deliver on these things, but I think, you really need to be pragmatic in terms of implementing that. I also thought there was a really interesting stat that they referred to. I think it came from a study that they referenced where 60% of people viewed AI as a coworker. So, I mean, I think that's, that goes back to the first story where you've got this very, approachable avatar. And, so anyway, I think it'll be interesting to see how people form those relationships. But for me, the article is more aspirational. It wasn't wrong, but there wasn't a lot of quantified data there, right? So,
yeah, and I agree. But I do like the underlying message and tone that AI implementations do need to be thoughtful and respectful of how AI and humans interact at work. And I think not forgetting the employee in everything is super important. So good stuff. Kevin, we've covered a few news stories. That's keen to kind of move on. AI Minute time. What's the focus for today?
Yeah, so today, the AI Minute, I'm going to talk about two terms that are not specifically AI terms, but they're super relevant to AI. And this is going to be hopefully a great segue into our exciting guest. So I'm going to talk about usage and adoption. And I think people kind of mix up these things. So I'm going to define it, and then maybe our guest will correct me. But usage for me, and that's where there was a lot of focus initially, and a lot of report tools do this. Usage is about how much something is being used. So if we drill down on that, that's like the number of minutes or the prompts or the messages. And that's important. But I would argue that adoption, which is about who is using it, is way more important than just usage. Because with adoption, we can have lots of adoption by few people. So usage looks super high, but really it's just a small subset of who we want to be using it. They're super users, but that's not perhaps what we're going for. There could be specific departments or specific roles. And if we look at AI, that could be using it, and that's great. But obviously broad-based adoption probably might be what we're looking, at, or maybe we built our business case around it, and we'll talk more about that. And of course, as I said, broad-based adoption with sustained usage is, I think, where we want to get to. So I think in the context of AI, it's important to understand the difference between usage and adoption and make sure that your organization has some reporting mechanisms that you're monitoring both of these. And with that, back to you, Rob, to introduce our guest.
Fantastic, Kevin. Thanks so much for that. A very useful and insightful piece of information there that's you're going to become very invaluable in the next conversation. I'm really pleased to introduce our guest speaker for today, who is Karana Gatimu, Principal Manager for the Microsoft 365 Customer Advocacy Group at Microsoft. Welcome, Karana. How's things?
Oh, things are great. Thank you so much for inviting me on your fantastic show.
Hey, thanks for joining us. And I think a great place to start would just be to get to know you a little bit more. Could you tell us a little bit about, what you do at Microsoft and, what your passion is? Because I know you're super passionate about all this, but just take us through, what you do on a daily basis.
I sure will. Well, I've been at Microsoft for going on 13 years now, but I've been in the ecosystem for a very, very long time. I was a customer. I've been a Microsoft partner working in and out of this space. By trade, I'm a business solution architect. So my job was always to listen to folks and bend the technology to solve their business problems. So I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I love the technology and I can go deep in things like SharePoint and Power Platform and what have you. But I really like people. And that has always made me a little bit different than some of my peers who are more heavier on the pro developer side. And so that has evolved into this job at Microsoft where I really get to sit in between product engineering and our customers and help them with guidance for adoption and implementation. We run our scale communities and get to produce shows like Mondays at Microsoft and Coffee in the Cloud. And it's just a fantastic job. And I have the most amazing team. I have to give them a huge shout out. They are fantastic humans who are so passionate about people's experience with the technology. So it's been a lifelong dream to work at Microsoft. That getting to work in engineering is fantastic. And I really enjoy it. I have a great job.
Thank you so much for that. Kevin, do you want to jump in and let's ask Karana some questions?
Yeah. So no, absolutely. So thank you very much for being here. This is awesome. There's so much excitement around AI and, across all the communication and collaboration, regardless of what vendor it is. Obviously you're with Microsoft, but, let's drill down on some of this because I know as well, governance and creating a foundation for successful AI is something that you've talked a lot about and invested a lot of time in. So, what specifically should organizations, and if I'm an IT pro at an organization, what should I be thinking about in terms of governance and other preparation to lay this foundation so that my AI, regardless of what vendor I choose, is successful?
Yeah, I think you really talked about it a little bit in your opening when you were talking about usage versus adoption. So my team and I, with a bunch of partners inside Microsoft, we just rewrote the Microsoft 365 implementation framework. And the first iteration of that is a course for Copilot, but you'll see it more across all of the different services that Microsoft offers. And this was really based on our experience with those early adopter customers, right? And what we've done is we've moved even on from the term adoption to user enablement. And the reason that we talk about user enablement is it's really about the satisfaction of your employees and your business leaders in your organization. And satisfaction is more than broad scale adoption of a new capability. And right now we're talking about AI, but before I took over and was responsible for all of Microsoft 365 and Copilot and Microsoft Viva, I worked in Teams engineering. And, then we were talking about Teams, right? It could be any technology or a new capability in the business, right? And so you really need to have your employees trust what you're doing. You need to have business leaders understand the value that they're getting from it. But as an IT pro, which was my first job inside Microsoft, by the way, it needs to be manageable, right? And you really need to understand the policies that govern it. In our case, our AI experiences are referred to as Copilot, and Copilot is really governed by the data that you have access to. Well, this has exposed something that I don't know, I've been talking about for a really long time in teamwork governance, which is information architecture. That's a term that's been around forever. It's not new. Everybody wants to talk about AI. Oh, and it's new. That's great. But good governance in Microsoft services or in technology in general has been around forever. So you really do have to think about who has access to what and how do you manage your environment, and do you have in your environment the muscle built to really engage with people, to find out what they think, to get feedback from them. Sadly, a lot of IT departments that I talk to, they really don't do that. They roll things out and they think an enablement campaign is a couple of emails. And I'm here to tell you that's not going to work, especially for AI.
And that, it was kind of a nice segue into my next question was, what are we getting wrong? What are the pitfalls right now? Is it just, rushing those implementations out and not really thinking about them? Or would you say there's some other big rocks to move?
Well, I think people think about them. I'm not, down on the IT professional who has more to do with less resources than ever. And, that's a common theme we hear from most IT groups, even if they've moved to modern service management. I think it's about them historically underfunding the human change work stream of technology implementation. And that was one of the big shifts that we did in our Copilot enablement framework, is that the human change work stream is equal to the technical readiness work stream. And even at Microsoft, that's not always been the case. People tend to discount employee nurturing and making sure that people have on-demand training and getting feedback from their employees. They have historically not funded that as well as they have some of the deeper technical capabilities. So I think IT has done what it can do with the resources it has, but now it's time to make sure you have a user enablement specialist on staff. We have a course for that, of course, which I am the steward of, and make sure that maybe you're using a Microsoft partner to really help you get over the hump of using things like Microsoft Viva and other tools to really engage with your employees. And don't stop with your AI implementation. Employee engagement has long been proven to be a differentiator in retention and managing the cost of talent acquisition. So it's good for the business to be good with people in your organization.
Well, that's terrific insight. Another insight that I was super fascinated. I saw you speak at ComsV Next and really enjoyed your presentation. One of the things that stood out for me is typically when you would pilot technology, like let's say maybe going back Teams phone or whatever, you would sprinkle it around the organization. You would let a few people in all the different roles try it out to pilot it to see how it works. And one of the things that you talked about with AI and some of the learnings is you may want to consider consolidating the pilot. And this was very fascinating to me. So can you kind of expand on that, what you've learned and, kind of why we should consider doing pilots in maybe a different way?
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, lots of the things that I talk about implementing AI are very similar to implementing any other kind of technology. But there are key differences, and you've really hit on one. You need cohorts of people who have familiarity with each other, who have similar jobs or in the same department, because this is not like teaching someone how to configure a Teams meeting or click a few boxes on a page. People are having a natural language relationship with this AI tool. And so it's a different feedback cycle. They need to have peer learning experiences. They need to share their prompts together. They need to be having an experience of getting to what we call our aha moment, right? I remember when they first put Copilot on my machine. This has been, I don't know, a year and a half ago now, in the early phases of it for our early adoption customers. I'm like, what is this thing? What am I supposed to do with it? I needed to talk with people I trusted to understand how am I supposed to be using it. Of course, I read the training material that we wrote and what have you, but it's not the same as having an experience with somebody I know in my organization. Peer learning and peer support are absolutely critical to an AI implementation. This is why we talk about, if you don't do anything else, have on-demand training and have a community of practice so people can share their experience. So spreading it out amongst a group of people who don't know each other and don't do similar work won't let them get to that aha moment together. Because without that, they won't get past how do I use this into how do we use this.
Right.
And that's the moment that your organization starts to get value from the implementation. When people start thinking beyond themselves about the technology and think about how it's going to change their team operations, their collaboration, their ability to meet the demands of customers and leaders across the company. So you want to really create that sense of camaraderie as they go through the process. And frankly, there's one last point I do want to make, which is, unlike many technologies, people have trust issues with technology. We haven't always delivered on our promises. And I certainly don't mean Microsoft. I mean, as an industry,
Right.
we make a lot of promises and, my refrigerator's going to tell me when I need milk. And yet I miss the notification, right? I mean, there's so much technology, even in a home environment, that people don't engage with. So if you really want their attention, you have to earn their trust. And AI has a longer journey to that because of all the sci-fi movies that have painted AI in a negative vein and the realities of data governance and bad actors in the world. So people being able to band together as they learn helps to offset that already negative, idea that folks have about AI and the concerns that they have about how it's maybe a personal threat to them and their job. I think you talked about earlier in the show, an HR article that had a lot of aspirational conversation around employee engagement in AI. But I do think it's important to really take the emotional journey of people into account as you do this work. And that is historically not something that your typical IT department has been well skilled in. And it may be viewed as aspirational or, nurturing or whatever, but I think it's really keen because people don't just chop off their emotions when they come to work. They're there under the surface. And if you don't deal with them, they will simply walk away from the experience you're trying to drive and never tell you why. You will get ghosted in your AI implementation if you don't, have some really good skills to bring people along on the journey and make them feel valued while you do it.
Yeah, no, that's I love that cohort insight. I think that was super key, and I love the very human centric kind of view that you bring to it because that's been my experience as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's also an extension of what we learned in COVID. In COVID, we coined the term "people first," and that was really about understanding how hybrid work changed the way we made relationships,
Right.
and changed the dynamics between people when I'm not sitting right next to you, and how do I build trust when we're thousands of miles apart or in different environments. And so we just have to extend that into this AI era.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because a classic IT implementation feels so finite versus AI being potentially infinite in its capabilities and the amount of kind of upskilling and continuous learning that's going to need to be done within the workforce. So how do you approach that? Do you I mean, that cohort approach, does that help that continuous learning?
It does. It does help. But also, I wrote an article about selecting an AI vendor from a more agnostic perspective. It's on because one of the big work streams in this is the leadership journey. Leaders need to think differently about technology implementations and AI vendors. And I believe that one of the first questions they should be asking any AI vendor is, how are you going to help my employees use your tool? What learning materials do you have? What's your strategy for managing human change? Of course, I feel very confident about Microsoft's work in this area, selfishly speaking, but we're also really passionate about that topic in general. And so I feel like AI leaders need to think more about this as we deliver new experiences, because frankly, technology has always been a continuous learning journey. Right. But the fact is that we haven't been very good at making it fun. And we haven't been very good at showing an employee why they should take time out of their day from all the things they're doing to continue to learn. Some people naturally do this, but not everybody, because they're busy. So having learning experiences in the flow of work like we do with our Viva Learning Copilot Academy, being able to do snackable content. I find that there's just only a certain group of folks who are going to sit through a 45-minute video or go to an hour-long class on something. That's where I got my start. Back in the day, I taught WordPerfect to lawyers. It was one of my first jobs before I got deeper into the technical side. And back then, I taught a 4-hour long class on how to work in WordPerfect. Well, maybe some folks will do that, but most people want to get a task-based video in the flow of what they're doing because they have a question. And so they also want to talk to a human, right? They want to talk to someone else who understands them, and preferably somebody who understands them intimately, which is why what we call a community of practice is so critical, right? And so people can self-serve knowledge at whatever stage they happen to be in the journey. Because as you go from, if you take my MS 4007 user enablement, user specialist class, right? That's like the basic knowledge you need to drive this for Copilot. But there are 2 more classes we'll be releasing, intermediate and advanced. And advanced is really, how do you do this on a global scale? If you work in a very large company, you will have cohorts at different points in that journey all around the world. So you really have to know how to create the machine that people can serve from and know how to listen to and address feedback. Because in those communities, if they don't feel a consistent engagement, if they don't feel like their questions are being answered and quickly when they need help, you'll lose the trust of your user community. And it's very difficult to get it back if you don't have it. But that's why this is a particular set of skills. It's different than being a service manager or even a low-code solution developer, being a user enablement specialist, whether you're a global one like me or, just getting started. It's a career path. And there are tools of this trade that need to be mastered so that you can really help people. It's a service-based job. You really want to help others, right?
That makes great sense.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, speaking of helping people, and I know Rob eventually is going to cut us off because it's a great discussion, but we're running out of time. But here's one of the things I wanted to present to you, which is increasingly, there's lots of AI assistants, but, grounding or retrieval augmented generation, I defined that as another AI minute in a previous show. Microsoft has some unique ways of grounding, the AI, and there's lots of talk of the Microsoft graph, but, we might be steeped in it because we listen to this on a daily basis. But for people that maybe aren't as aware of what the Microsoft graph is and how Copilot grounds, kind of your prompts and the responses, how would you quickly kind of position what the Microsoft graph is and what it brings to generative AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think people are most familiar with whether it's ChatGPT or even copilot.microsoft.com. You go to the web and you put in a prompt.
Right.
That's fantastic, but that's grounded on web data. It's not grounded on your business data. To have your prompts and your answers and to make that AI tool most effective for you, it needs to be grounded on the data that's relevant in your business. And in Microsoft land, all that data is stored in the Microsoft Graph. And so when you log in with your Microsoft corporate credentials, your Entra ID, you'll be able to access that. So the answer to that prompt that you put in is going to be very different than what you get from generic web data. This is why your information architecture, what's stored where, what documents are stored where really matters, because it's going to base that answer on what you have permissions to view. Right. And you can get a portion of this with commercial data protection on the web once you've logged in. But of course, then you have Copilot for Microsoft 365 and it's built into all your Office apps. But I really like people to understand the basic difference between using a web-based generative AI experience, no matter whose it is, and logging in and getting access to your business data, whether it's on the web or in Microsoft 365 or another supplier. Those are really the two differences and why the answers are different and the data is grounded different. And this is why trusting your AI vendor is so important, right? And so you can check out that page, Leading in the Area of AI. It's on my site, adoption.microsoft.com. And I have articles about this, creating an AI governance council, how to choose an AI vendor, the things to ask. Really think about that leadership journey, because before your users ever get there, you want to understand that you've really reviewed the data that's in your enterprise so that the right people have the access to the right information at the right time. And by the way, should be doing that anyway.
Yeah,
It's a little like eating your vegetables, right?
absolutely. And just
Yeah.
very quickly, I know Kevin. I know Kevin's got one more question for you as well. But just in terms of keeping that human in the loop with AI, what kind of best practices would you kind of recommend just to kind of help, I suppose, audit those AI decisions and ultimately make sure they align to the outcome you're trying to achieve?
Absolutely. Well, there's two views on that. I'm a fan of omni-channel marketing. I'm a fan of meeting people where they are with the information they need. So we use tools like Viva Amplify to be able to craft communications once and put them many places, right? So Viva Amplify lets me send people an email or make a post in Teams, make a post in Viva Engage, so that I'm hitting all of those places that people might be. But I'm also a fan of, obviously, of that human interaction. I really believe that one of the most essential best practices is holding office hours in that community of practice where people can come together and somebody is sharing new information. Like a really perfect office hours has half about some new information about new capabilities are available. And then the rest is really about real world scenarios. We built an interactive scenario library online specifically because of this. I think people need to understand, leaders need to understand what to measure, but people need to understand the steps of what to do if they want to improve an HR process or a marketing process. And our scenario library does just that. You even have a slide where you can download, right? But when Sally shows me how she's prompting in Copilot, I start to get an understanding that I'm not going to get from some online video or vendor presentation or what have you. I'm learning from my peer. So, omni-channel communications and facilitating peer learning on a regular basis are absolutely essential to this work right now, especially.
Fantastic.
Well, and I guess, yeah, so now that we've formed you up with easy questions or whatever, I mean, but this isn't so much a hard question, but it is a question that often comes up, which is to say, you've got the Zoom AI companion, the WebEx AI assistant, Apple Intelligence whenever it's actually available. I mean, all of those vendors have said, we're going to include our AI assistant at no additional cost. And so
Right.
clearly, I mean, specifically, you know, Copilot for Microsoft 365, that Copilot of the many Copilots, that comes at a cost, $30 per user per month, $360 per user per year. So, you know, many IT pros and leaders are saying, okay, do we get value? How do we create the business case around that? Is Microsoft going to feel pricing pressure and reduce it? But, you know, what would you say in terms of how people should approach trying to, you know, move forward with the additional investment that Copilot for Microsoft 365 requires?
Absolutely. It's a fantastic question. And it's one of the things I wrote about in my essay around creating an AI council. What is your business objective to implementing AI? Are you trying to serve your customers better, reduce internal costs by being more efficient? Start there. Really understand what you're going to get out of it, because I think what we see with leaders who go through this journey is that first they're thinking about efficiencies, and then they start to think about revenue growth because they've gone through their aha moment about what AI can do. I'd suggest to those leaders to start with revenue growth scenarios and factor in the cost of something like Microsoft 365 Copilot experiences along with that, because growth is what is the most positive outcome of implementation of AI, not cost efficiencies. If you want to try something for free, then go to copilot.microsoft.com. Try that free experience. Start your users there. But if you want commercial data protection and the most of our responsible AI principles, and to use your own data within a trusted environment like a Microsoft 365 tenant, we believe that that has value. We believe that that is worth the licensing that we charge for it. And certainly, we've seen the value that has come back from our early adopter customers. We published a lot of information. Our work trends index research really shows that in terms of the value people are getting for it. So we don't mind if you start with something free, even if it's with another supplier. Go ahead and do that. But we believe strongly that when you really want to drive revenue and drive a trusted experience with your employees right in the flow of their work, you're going to come home to Microsoft.
Well, Karana, thank you so much for your detailed, insightful, and transparent answers. This has been a great discussion. I think it's going to have great value to the audience. Back to you, Rob, to wrap things up.
Well, absolutely. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. So, Kevin, Karana, it's been awesome talking to you today. Thank you so much for joining me. And thanks to everyone for watching our AI show. If you've got some good takeaways from today's session, do give us a quick mention on social, and you can connect with Kevin or myself on LinkedIn, and our links are in the description. I'm Rob Scott from UC Today. Thanks for watching.